Hello and welcome back to another great episode of hashtag Screw the W2. And today's guest is another one who did exactly that, and he's going to share his story. Chad Zdenek, CSQ Properties. Welcome to the show.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, John. I'm definitely excited to be here and I can relate to screw the W2.
Yep, yeah. More I network, the more I hear this from people, and I've shared my story back on episode 0, and then this kind of took a life of its own, and everyone has an interesting story. So glad you could come on and share yours. So, first off, Chad, maybe you can just kind of take us back in time, however long ago that was. What was your previous job? What was it? What was an average day like for you?
Sure. So I actually started working pretty young, summers and during school even for quite a few years, but at the age of 13.
Okay.
And ever since 13, I always had side jobs and side hustles. I've always been an entrepreneur. My dad is an eye surgeon. My grandpa was
Oh,
a doctor as well. So they were very like formal academics focused for me and really pushed me into that realm. So actually I wound up getting 3 master's degrees while working full time.
wow.
And so my first job out of undergrad was working for Boeing Rocketdyne on the space
Okay.
shuttle main engines, and
Wow.
full on W2. I worked as a cubicle jockey from 7 a.m. to 4 or 5 p.m. 5 days a week, very structured schedule.
Hmm.
And back in those days, you had to show up to work every day, and you couldn't work
Yep.
from home. And yeah, I'll tell you, so every day I had to be there at 7 a.m. and
Ugh,
we had a 7:15 a.m. meeting every day.
ugh.
So, you'd
Whether
be
there was anything to
meeting.
talk about or not, you had to have a meeting for the sake of having a meeting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you had to be there, maybe you could be 10 minutes late to work, but you had a 7:15 meeting you got to be ready to rock and roll for. And
Sure.
don't get me wrong, I mean, Boeing was an amazing company to work for and worked with an amazing group of people, a bunch of rocket scientists and engineers was incredible. And I worked there for 7 years.
Okay.
But that's basically how I started, and that was my first job out of school at 21 years old. I started working there.
Wow. Sounds good. Now, with that, obviously, been entrepreneurial or had side hustles since you were 13 and then went on to Boeing after school. What was like maybe like a pivotal moment, or maybe there's a series of moments where you thought, this isn't the life for me, or there's got to be something else, or for the love of God, I can't take any more of these 7:15 meetings, whatever the case was.
Yeah, so good question. So I think for me, it was probably a combination of two different things.
Okay.
And when I got my master's in structural engineering from USC, and then rolled over into UCLA of all other schools to get my MBA.
Okay.
And on my first year of my MBA program, both my other brothers were also at UCLA playing football in undergrad. And
Okay.
my one brother had started a lighting business after his 5th year of football, started a primarily a Christmas lighting business.
Hmm.
And I kind of used that as my pet project, focusing on entrepreneurial studies and during
Yeah.
my MBA, and kind of helped him grow that business. It just started with him, my sister, and a couple workers, basically hanging lights for friends. And he wanted me to come over and work for him. And I mean, I was on the executive management track at Boeing. They had supported me through 2 master's degrees. It was an incredible place to
Wow.
work. So, like, I was on a good trajectory, right? I mean, it was maybe not quite my passion, but it was certainly exciting. But my brother really wanted me to come work with him, and I, had a great relationship with him, and I would have liked to have done that too. So that was like one thing that was kind of going on in the background for probably 2 years. And then the other thing is I was really working pretty hard. Like, even though I was going to school at nights and weekends, like, I was working full time. I was a team lead for several different projects, and I felt like I was really trying to improve myself, working at Boeing. And then, like, I'd come up to an annual raise and I got like a 4% raise.
Yeah.
And I thought like, oh my gosh, I'm working as hard as I can.
Yeah.
I mean, and so, and I got a 4% raise. And meanwhile, the total slackers in the business were getting like a 1% raise, right? Like the people
Yeah.
that like literally just barely show up and kind of hide in the cubicle and don't do a whole lot of work. They got 1%.
Wow.
So I'm like, is it really worth a 3% delta? And so that was like the other big kind of thing that went off in my head. And between those two things, I told my brother, I'm like, look, I'm like, you get this business to a certain level. I said, I'll leave Rocket Iron and I'll come work with you.
Okay.
And so he got to that level like within 2 years. And now here's the interesting thing. So, and you talk about like the entrepreneurial leap of faith, right?
Hmm.
So I had to take a 50% pay cut to go work with my brother. He
Oof.
gave me half the business, made me a 50% owner. I took a 50% pay cut, and my brother paid me more than he was paying himself to make this happen.
Wow.
And he was the one that technically founded the company. So like we both made sacrifices. And then fast forward 15 years later, we grew it to be about 75 employees. We had three different
Wow.
warehouses, and we were the largest company in LA doing what we did.
Okay. Wow. It's quite the story there to, like you said, make the leap of faith, and then you have almost 100 employees. So, with that, and I know you said you kind of had the realization was, well, gee, is a 3% delta, worth it to continue with this grind here at Boeing? From that point when you kind of had that realization, how much time had passed from where you have that, and then you hand in your resignation and you tell your brother, "Yep, I'm all in."
So it was kind of in the, like I said, in the works in the background where I was helping my brother grow the business, just from like a consulting standpoint, using his
Okay.
project, his company as a model for my MBA. And so that was going on in the background. And then I graduated from UCLA, and probably a couple months later, I've got my whopping 4% raise. And then probably like 3 months after that, I turned in my notice.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it
And
did happen pretty quick, but it wasn't like just I got a 4% raise and I'm out. It wasn't like
sure.
that. There was a lot of things kind of moving in the background, and then you could say what was the straw that broke the camel's back. Might have been that. I mean, the 4%, even if they would have given me a like 8%, I still would have left because I told my brother I would have, right?
Sure.
So, but the 4% just really made me think like, yeah, I'm probably doing the right choice here because I've
Yeah.
been working too hard to get a 3% above the
Right.
bottom feeder raise.
Exactly. Well, and fast forward, and who knows what they're doing now, but if that was today and you got a 4% raise and inflation's about double that, well, you're still behind, even if you've worked your butt off at that point. So,
Yeah, and look, that's happening to a lot of people, right? I mean, I'm sure
mhm.
there's a lot of your listeners that can really relate to that. And companies, frankly, are in a really tough spot right now, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I can definitely resonate with the companies and the company owners where profits are really tight, money is
Mhm.
tight, supply chain issues, and even like personnel issues, right? I mean, it's hard to pay people more than inflation. That's why inflation is one
Mhm.
of the worst things for an economy and a society, and we got some serious issues to deal with right now.
Exactly. Well, and I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole of what companies should and shouldn't do. But I just think back to the Great Recession when, you named the bank, General Motors, and so many others got bailouts. And then the talk track was like, well, they shouldn't be bailed out by the government. They should have plenty of money on hand and liquidity, et cetera. Well, now they're trying to do that, build up liquidity, have reserves, hopefully not Silicon Valley Bank at the time of this recording, and trying to weather through a possible recession. And okay, I think we're sitting on good stable footing. Oh, well, why aren't you paying your employees more? It's like, well, if we paid them everything that we had, then we're going to need a bailout, but you don't want bailouts, so we got to save money. But
Mhm.
if we save money, we look greedy, and just back and forth. And I don't know,
Totally.
not that I have the right answer or the silver bullet, but I just kind of find it funny. It's like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
Chad, I'm just curious. Some people kind of have a vague memory. Some people know to the date and they can remember which perfume the secretary was wearing on that day. But do you remember exactly when it was that your last day at a W-2 job was?
So I'll tell you what's interesting, and it was I read your bio about your epiphany in November of 2014, but you couldn't
Yep.
remember the date.
Hmm.
I'm actually similar. So mine was actually
Okay.
November of
Oh, okay.
2003.
Okay.
And the date is a little bit foggy because even though I gave my notice, I think I offered to stay on like as long as they wanted. And
Yep.
they it was like 2 weeks officially, but I stayed on for like another 5 months, like helping out on
Okay.
the projects, like because I was a team lead and helping out, maybe 10 hours a week or something like that, 12 hours a week, something kind of small just to kind of finish up that project. I offered to
Okay.
stay on. So that's why it was kind of a foggy date, but it was
Sure.
November of 2003.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and kind of funny you mentioned that just with my story. I mean, I was, want to be professional, give 2 weeks notice. I offered to stay on for 4 weeks. It's like, hey, there's a lot of, proposals, account reviews, CRM cleanup, et cetera, in the pipeline. It's like, hey, I'll stay on for 4 weeks, train in my replacement, get all this cleared up, make it as seamless as possible. And then let's see, he'd be my boss's boss who just said, nope, you're done as of today. And they shut down my email in 12 hours. I'm like, well, here's my to-do list. Have fun.
Wow. So
Yeah.
that was
So
they didn't even you didn't even stay on for 2 weeks. They just let you
no,
go and did.
yeah, I gave my resignation, and I had I kind of had in on the calendars like okay, October 1st, 2019, it would be exactly 12 years that I was in the industry, and somewhat, arbitrary, but somewhat it's like, yep, let's make it even 12 years. And it's like, I don't want to be a jerk and just walk off. It's like I do want to make this a seamless transition, but then yeah, like I said, my boss's boss, who at the time was the CEO's brother, so a little nepotism in the company. He could do whatever he wanted. That's another
Mhm.
tangent I could go off on. So, but no, Chad. Obviously, we're approaching nearly 20 years since took the leap of faith. You left Boeing, you went all in on entrepreneurial path, and then obviously expanded your portfolio since then. But any like regrets or anything you do miss back from the W-2 days?
I don't have any regrets. I'll tell you, I did get ridiculed pretty hard by my engineer colleagues. It's like because I was doing really well at Boeing, like I said, executive management track, and then here I go to work with a very very small, primarily Christmas lighting business, and like it didn't make sense for a lot of people, right, including
Sure.
quite a few people in my own family. And so from the outside it really didn't make sense, but for me, one, I always had that entrepreneurial passion, and two, like I've always done best when I bet on myself.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because and this is like an eye opener for people. Like it's so true, the saying that says, why would I want to work 40 hours for someone else when I can work 80 for myself?
Yep.
Like you might want to take that leap of faith, but it's gonna cost more than you think it
Mhm.
is, and it's gonna take much longer than you think it will.
Right.
And that's been true. I mean, look, I've founded or helped start 8 different businesses now, and it's been
Wow.
true for all of them. And I don't know if I'm a slow guy or I'm a slow worker. Like I don't think that's it, because there's a lot of other people that share that type of experience, but
Hmm.
it does take a long time to do that. So I don't have any regrets. I do miss kind of the excitement and the prestige, if you will, of working on
Okay.
the space shuttle main engines and working at a
Wow.
rocket factory. Like that was really cool. And now the company's doing some more amazing things for NASA on different rocket platforms. So like that would have been me, right? And that was pretty
Hmm.
exciting. I got to travel to different NASA space flight centers, and that was
Wow.
exciting. So like that part of it I do miss. The people were amazing for the most part. I mean, there was a few slackers, but for the most part, like really, really brilliant people.
Hmm.
So I do miss that. But that being said, nothing's ever 100%, and I still wouldn't go back. I still, really, I appreciate the path I've been on. I wound up selling that business in 2018. My brother bought me out. He still
Oh
runs the
wow.
company today. And then I went into real estate full time, and now I've got $150 million portfolio in real
Wow.
estate for assets under management, and now CSQ Properties is what I do with that. So that's been another great journey.
Cool. Sounds good. And I'm guessing, yeah, the $150 million would have taken you a lot longer to get there with a 4% annual raise. I don't even want to think of how long that would take. But with that, Chad, and you've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but since you left in 2003, or maybe even fast forward to 2018 when you got bought out of your brother bought you out of the business and then started in real estate, what's been the best part of your this journey for you, or what's been the um thing that you look back on that this is the greatest thing for me that I never would have had I stayed at a W-2 job?
I think for me is just the entrepreneurial path and kind of the unknown, right? I
Okay.
mean, there's an element of excitement there when you're just really not sure how it's going to work out. But you've got to be resourceful, you've got to have grit, you've got to have hustle, and you figure it out, right? I think I don't think entrepreneurs you have to be born as an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur, right? I mean, it's definitely a skill that you can develop, and people have different risk tolerances. So, I'm an engineer by trade. Like that's really I'm an engineer, right? So
Okay.
I tend to be very methodical. I maybe tend to overanalyze sometimes, but that's good for mitigating risk. So there's definitely positives to it, and everyone has their own risk profile along that whole spectrum. So whatever it is for you, if it's something that you're passionate about, like you'll find a way to be successful. I'll tell you, in most cases, it's gonna cost you twice as much as you think, and it's gonna take three
Yep.
times as long. But you'll get there if it's what you're passionate about. And
Sure.
and so I think there's a lot of different ways you can go through that. People can listen to your show. I know you've dove into a lot of different stories on how people can do that. There's a million different ways to do it, and I
Mm-hmm.
would say there's no right way, but you can figure it out. And if it is your passion, in the end, you won't have any regrets.
Makes sense. On that note, Chad, and I'm just, thinking back whether it's, you 20 years ago or myself 9 years ago, or, maybe anyone listening to this that, gosh, I got another 7 o'clock meeting I have to make that I can't stand, or yippee, I got a 5% raise and my housing cost just went up 10% or whatever. And, they listen to our stories, they hear about our successes, but at the same token, a lot of startups and entrepreneurial paths fail. So a lot of times people are feeling stuck in their job. They have to stay there. Nope, I can't take the risk. I, have a family, I have health insurance, whatever the case may be. To any of those listeners out there that do feel stuck in their W-2 job, what words of advice or encouragement would you give them?
Well, I would suggest that yeah, it's statistically 90% of startups are fail within the first 5 years, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it is how it is. But I'll tell you this, that most entrepreneurs have had failures. I've had two
Hmm.
businesses that failed, right? Out of those eight I told you about, arguably two, at least two didn't
Okay.
work out. Um, so
Or
so
varying
you look at
levels of success, maybe.
yeah, no, for sure. And it depends how open some of your guests are, right? Like that you might have thought listening to my story for the first, 20 minutes we've been talking, like, oh my gosh, Chad's a smart guy, and of course he's gonna be successful. But that's not really the case. Like I'm telling you, like two of my companies failed. They
Hmm.
failed. One was within a year, and one was within 2 years.
Okay.
And but I'll tell you, going back to the risk aversion or risk mitigation type approach, doing those businesses was not the only thing I was doing. Right, I didn't hang my hat on, okay, I have to be successful in this business or I'll be out on the streets. That's not the
Right.
case, right? I had other things going on, and most successful people will have multiple income streams from different
Hmm.
things. That's why I love passive income, and what I'm
Yep.
doing right now with CSQ properties. But when I started those two businesses, it wasn't the only thing I was doing. So you just keep in mind that, okay, it might not work out. It's always good to have a plan B.
Hmm.
And but eventually, if you're betting on yourself and you're not giving up, eventually you will hit something that works. And then you'll be one of those success stories that people look back and say, "Oh my gosh, how did he make it? Or how did she make it?" And I'll tell you, there's some war wounds along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some quote and I can't remember who said it. It was something along the lines of like not many people realize the overnight successes take on average 20 years or something along those lines. And it
Yeah.
is very true. People look at, pick a name, Mark Cuban. It's like, oh, they're just such a big success. It's like, no, it took years, a lot of dedication, and a lot of failures along the way. And people talk about their successes, but not failures as much.
Yeah. The other quote I really like similar to that is the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yep. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, drawn a. I don't know. I kind of have like an encyclopedia of sayings, but sometimes matching up who said it and what was said sometimes gets intermixed
That's
in
tough.
there. So
Yeah.
yeah. Well, as we wrap this up, Chad, and again, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to share your story with my listeners. For lack of a better marketing term, I call this the unscrewed moment of my show. As we're into 2023, are there any new projects you're working on? Anything you want to share, or maybe something that you're most excited about before the year ends?
So for me, I'm 100% in on real estate. It's
Okay.
definitely a dicey time right now with interest rates increasing the way they are, and lots of talks and discussions about recessions.
Hmm.
So that being said, I still really am excited about real estate. I think
Okay.
it's the best get rich slowly scheme out there, right? So it might not happen overnight, but if you
Yeah.
look at people that have been in real estate for 20 years, like
Hmm.
all of them are successful, right?
Yeah.
So to me, I'm really motivated and encouraged by that.
Yeah, makes sense. And yeah, I've talked to, I'm a real estate investor as well. I've talked to many, and about the only regret I hear across the board from people that got into real estate is that I didn't start sooner. That's about the one thing I've heard probably the most often as a
Yeah,
regret.
yeah, totally. I agree. And maybe a tool, or I don't know, tool is the right word, but one thing that might be good for people like newer entrepreneurs or people that looking to get into it. I'm a part of a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization, which
Okay.
is a group of 17,000 business
Wow.
owners worldwide. And that's been an incredible group. They do have quite a few free resources out there too that you can find on the internet. And basically they have two different levels of businesses that are gross revenues of at least 250 grand a year can be in the accelerator program, or if they're clearing at least $1 million a year in revenue, you can be an EO member. And
Wow.
I've been a member of that organization for 10 years, and it's been really helpful for me in growing as a person and growing as an entrepreneur.
Sounds good. All right. And for those listening, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well as Chad's contact information of CSQ Properties to see what he's up to now or in the future. With that, Chad, I want to thank you again for your time and hope you have a great rest of the week.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, John.